Well, good evening and welcome to the pre-show, folks. 3 minutes of uninterrupted bliss as we get this show off the road tonight, which begins at 3 minutes after the top of the hour. We're covering a familiar subject tonight, hopefully some new stuff, some detailed stuff, so hopefully you'll enjoy it tonight. That was just a little too full. I have my Captain Kirk coaster or my cup. And so, yes, tonight, this is the pre-show. Not tonight, every night. And we're covering, as I just mentioned, a topic that we've covered before, but in a little greater detail. I think you'll enjoy this. So this guy over here, AMENHOTEP II. And it's going to be more than one night. We could spend weeks on this. But I thought it'd be nice to break out some of the old original stuff that we did very early on with this show. And so hopefully everybody will enjoy that. We got about a minute and a half before we go live over on the radio network. That's odysseyradio.com. So come and join us over there. If you just want to hear the audio, if you want to watch the video simulcast, you can. This is not like a great, brilliant TV production. If we did that, we'd probably only do one show per week. But it's just fun to face-to-face, connect, talk, all that good stuff. Captain's Cabin will be able to talk a little more than we can in this format, but I can see you in the chat room. Hey, Morgan Snow. Good to see you. Randall Flagg, good to see you too. My feet are freezing. Of course, I'm barefoot too. Our temps have dropped. We've gone back almost down to seasonal weather. We're in the mid-30s today. It's supposed to be like the low 20s for our common temperature, this average temp this time of year. And it's been in the upper 50s to 60s for 2 weeks. So it's been awfully nice. Here we go. Stand by. Going dark.
Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the program. I am your host, Scotty Roberts. This is my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY radio.com. For all those of you who aren't over there, you can go over and hear this show in its audio format. You can also check it out for rebroadcasts of this show throughout the week. And, of course, anybody over there, if you want to watch the video simulcast and join the chat room, the best place out of all the places this show broadcasts online, the best place is to go over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. Once you are there, look up this show and you will find the chat room there. If you chat with us from Facebook or from Twitter or from Patreon, well, Patreon doesn't really link up with us, but if you chat anywhere else, it doesn't get seen where the bulk of the listeners chat, and that's over on the YouTube channel. So come on over to youtube.com/Scotty Roberts, and you can chat with everybody else. So everybody, welcome. Hey to Randall Flagg and Morgan Snow. Good to see you. Steph Cuervo Queen is here, and you're the only three showing your faces out of there's a whole lot more than you guys. Oh, we just lost one, but there's a whole bunch of you out there that aren't even showing in the channel. Come on in. you can come on in and show your face and chat with everybody else and join the broadcast. We cannot take your calls live during the show, but we can during the captain's cabin. And one of these days we'll figure it out. It's just, I don't know what it is. And I've left it at that. I've said that a million times. There's something that prevents us from me hearing the broadcast or a guest or a caller or anybody during the broadcast to the network. There's something about that connection that wipes out my ability to hear. So we have cookies in this chat room, says Jason Patrick. Well, I should certainly hope so. Cookies in the chat room. Well, tonight I was really torn between what I wanted to talk about, and I had two distinct things. I had the topic that you see up there, Amenhotep II, the real question behind the Exodus in the Bible. And I also had some great political fodder that I wanted to use to spark some. And, it's politics, yes, but it's politics in the sense that it's civics. It's what's going on in our country. I was going to ask, and you can mull this over because this could be a topic next week. What is the use of the presidency in the United States? Has it outlived its usefulness? Or has the current occupant of the White House, of the Oval Office, made people say, well, the presidency is irrelevant? Because, in my opinion, he is not a leader. So I'm not going to get into it. If I start talking that way, I'm going to crack into it and we're going to switch topics. So let's not do that. But I want you to think about that, especially in light of, and I thought it was very interesting what happened yesterday, was that the Department of Justice, the special counsel, came back and said, we're not going to prosecute Biden for all of his documents that he's obtained illegally over the last 40 years when he was not president. And they said the reason they weren't going to prosecute, it's not because, the report says, not because there isn't illegal activity there, but because he's too old. He's a good-hearted man who's, and the report actually stated this, he's a good-hearted man who is just too old, and he's got memory loss and so on, significant memory loss, so it's just not worth prosecuting him. And of course, Biden gave a speech. He was kind of gleeful about that and took his shots at Trump and, the great unifier that he is. And while taking his shots at Trump, kind of was like, yeah, I'm an old man and I'm, I don't remember things and all of this. He just pretty much put the nail in the coffin himself. Well, of course, the left is coming back and trying to explain away. They're mad at what the DOJ had to say in this report, but they agreed with it. But they didn't like the way they characterized Joe Biden. I was trying to say Donald Trump. Bill Clinton came to mind because I just read something about him. And so talking about the relevancy of the presidency, do you think it's relevant anymore? We will talk about that. Maybe we'll pick it up in the captain's cabin tonight a little bit. But I think, let's see, just sent you a Biden meme, Scotty and Sean. Okay. All right, Michelle, thank you. I'll have to see what that is. Let's just take a look at it right now. Biden, nice. Let's see, we're in a rare photo of an actual crock of shit. There you go. Very nice. Folks, maybe Jason will share that one for you. So, but that's pretty much it, Michelle. A crock of shit. And, part of me feels bad for Biden. He's an old dude. He should not. I put up a thing today, not a meme, but I have my little glorified memes that I do called For the Record. And I put them up here and on my Instagram, Facebook and my Instagram. And I put special counsel Her says Biden could not stand trial because, quote, Biden is a sympathetic, well meaning, elderly man with a poor, significantly limited memory, end quote. Or, in other words, a cute, bumbling, senile old man. The Democrats' response would be they accept the special counsel's findings, but they want Americans and the world to believe that Joe Biden is capable of being president of the United States, the leader of the free world, with his finger on the nuclear button for a second term. Even though he's a cute, bumbling, senile old man. So there you go. It staggers the mind why we have these gymnastics of the imagination being played out in our country. Is our world not in rough shape enough that we have to have the leader of this country be somebody who is a cute, bumbling, senile, old duffer? Uh, I think the whole question of whether or not the president is relevant anymore, the presidency, has really come up because of the way Biden is proving that he doesn't really need to do anything because he doesn't. Maybe we're missing something. Maybe behind the scenes, like Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, says he's the smartest man in the room. Maybe we're missing that. But look, I'm getting into it. I don't want to get into it tonight because I want to do something that I think this stuff is fun. It's fun to talk about, even though it's irritating as hell. But at the same time, I want to dig into this material that's also fun. It's fun for me. Now, many of you have heard me talk many times on this show in public events about the Exodus, the Pharaoh of the Exodus. When did the Exodus take place? My guy sitting back there over my shoulder. Let's turn this so you can see him a little bit. Right there in the right corner, Senenmut, that guy. I've talked about him many, many times on the show. It was a topic of a book I wrote. He was mentioned in a couple of other books I wrote. And you'd think that this is a dead topic, but it's really not. Because even yesterday, I just came across somebody saying something totally unrelated, had nothing to do with the Exodus, but talking about these biblical stories, the Old Testament stories. Well, it's all just a bunch of hooey, it's a bunch of mythology, etc., etc., etc. And that makes me look at this stuff fresh again to say, what makes me think I've got any answers that are verifiable, that have veracity to them, that would leave the Bible as being something that is easily understood, and the history something that is acceptable. And I have always thought, and I ask this question when it comes to this kind of thing, why do I need to dig into the study of Scripture in order to prove whether or not it is efficacious for history? Faith stories, as I've said many times, you can take or leave. But the story, the historical account, why do we have to dig into that? Because there are so many stories out there that we know are mythology. But how many kings and queens and the kings and queens lists of the world, how many events like that do we discount simply because there's a story of faith that's attached to it or a religion is attached to it? That makes it kind of hard. Sean Stroik says, but a black lesbian, so an extra 150 points. What did I miss? So let's see. Let me back this up. I got to see what the hell you're talking about over there. Hi, Claudette, says Michelle. Randall Flagg, interesting. 9 months coming up. Interesting 9 months coming. I agree with you, Randall. I see where you're talking about the election, Sean. Yeah, it'll be very interesting. It fits the kabuki theater narrative, says Michelle Canham Free. Are you talking about the elections or are you talking about presidency? Get your popcorn and lawn chairs, popcorn, yellow striped smile. Oh, okay. That's for trying to get an emoticon in there, I think. A black lesbian is so an extra 150 points. There you go. I know who you're talking about. Steph says, "Well, Randall, I'm watching my astrology charts. They're pretty interesting. The one on Prince Charles is looking on track. What are they saying about the upcoming elections in the United States?" Steph, that would be interesting to see, huh? Or are they remaining mystical and disjointed? Michelle Kennedy says, all the politics, Scotty Roberts. There it is. Yep. Christopher Schultz, good to see you. Good evening. And let's go. Let's ride. Let's ride. And so we're not doing the political one tonight. This is where I was torn. Do I do the thing I really am into? The studying the Exodus, the biblical history, all of that. And don't get scared away because it's Bible history. Oh, he's talking about the Bible again. No, we're talking about history. There's so many interesting things in history. I'm going to, I swear, I keep threatening to do this. I'm going to repeat broadcasts with newer information on top of what I already did. The series I did on King David and King David out of the Bible. What do we know about David? As a young man, he slew the giant Goliath, and that's become a mythological story down through the ages. But did it ever really happen? Who were these people? Who really did it? What happened when David unified these clans and these territories in Israel and made a singular kingdom? How much like kings of his day was David? You start studying that stuff, and the quaint, cute little storyboard Sunday school stories become very real people. That's what is intriguing to me. That's why, like I say, this guy back here, Senenmut, my claiming that he is Moses, based on my research and study, that to me is fascinating. When you can take a story that doesn't give you a lot of detail, and then you got to ask, because there's not a lot of detail, why wasn't the detail included? Why don't we know these things? Why didn't Moses, the man who wrote the book in the Old Testament, why didn't he give us more details? Lots of whys, lots of questions, lots of this, lots of that. And so I want you to enjoy this stuff because the history is utterly fascinating. When you can put historical events together with theological events, you are looking at something that is incredibly fascinating as far as I'm concerned. That's what drew me into archaeology. That's what drew me into being an historian. That's why I got my degree in history. Because I love history. I think it's fantastic. You know the stories that tell, like, of Pilate's cornerstone. Pilate considered to be a myth until they find an inscription of his on a cornerstone in Israel. That cornerstone sits in the Jerusalem Museum now. It was only found in the 60s. So things like that, finding that there is so much out there that verifies, qualifies, quantifies, backs up all these different stories that we've heard since we were kids. So I've got some information. I got a ton of information, by the way, on the Exodus, as you might think, as you might know. And if you ever, there's been no real good movie made on it. However, I will say Ridley Scott's Exodus Gods and Kings is really fascinating to watch. It's fun to watch. I did not like it from an historical point of view because they basically followed the same old yawn story. The same story. It's basically a remake of the Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner, Cecil B. DeMille Ten Commandments from the 50s. That's basically all his movie was, Exodus, Gods, and Kings, with a couple of new twists. Um, but I enjoyed the movie. There were parts of it I think that were really fascinating. But many Egyptologists, even the ones that Ridley Scott used for the movie, which I think were probably not very good at what they did. I wish he'd have asked me. But many Egyptologists have led this charge to deny the veracity of the Israelite exodus from Egypt. Renowned Egyptologist David Redford concluded the almost insurmountable difficulties, he says, in interpreting the Exodus narrative as history have led some to dub it mythology rather than a detailed reporting of historical facts, which I believe it is. And therefore, it's impossible to locate geographically the Exodus, the events of the Exodus. Redford then betrayed his affinity with this fraternity when he stated that despite the lateness and unreliability of the story in Exodus, no one can deny that the tradition of Israel's coming out of Egypt was one of long standing. And so, although the affirmation or the disputation of Redford's claim is a legitimate pursuit, I'm going to bring information to you that's going to concentrate on a completely different goal. And the first thing I want to do is start to establish why the Exodus has efficacious history in Scripture, and why just because it's a story in a religious text does not necessarily mean it is mythological or fictional. As I've always said, you've got to separate the two out. I think you can, whether you believe this or not, by faith, you can take the faith stories in the Old Testament and do with them what you will. But I think the faith stories have real history wrapped around them. And there's a lot of that history that they attribute to their faith issues. Hey, Elderberry, what's new? Not me. I'm old. So I hated what Scotty did with the stone angels who looked like Transformers. Oh, you're talking about in the Noah movie. He should have put all that CGI into magnificent beings of light. I agree with you there. That was in the Russell Crowe, Ridley Scott version of Noah, which was kind of a cool movie. Except I didn't really like the stone creatures. But I will tell you something, Niall, and everybody. Those stone creatures, there's a lot more to that than you might think if you dig into not just Old Testament as we know it in the English Bible, but you look into rabbinic writings, you look into Jewish writings, you're going to find that there are beings that were encased in stone back then, and they were released. So they messed with it a little bit, of course, and they tried to make Noah look like a weirdo that's going to kill his family. But there was more to the message than that. So I enjoyed that movie too, but from a very different point of view. So while debate long has raged over the trustworthiness of the biblical narrative in the Moses story, the Exodus story, describing an Israelite presence in Egypt in the middle of the second millennium BCE, less of the focus has been placed on the identification of the Exodus Pharaoh, who would have ruled over Egypt at the time of the Israelite Exodus. And if there's to be any kind of possibility of an Israelite presence in Egypt or an Exodus during this era, this dating system, a synchronization of ancient Israelite and Egyptian chronologies would have to validate a specific Pharaoh, who not only fits the mold chronologically, but one who meets the stringent biographical requirements presented by the biblical text. So when you are looking at a story like the Exodus and the Pharaoh of the Exodus, who you all know, whether you remember his name or not, you all know I've established many times over who I think that was. His name is right in the title of the Tonight Show. Um, you start looking at that, and you're going to find the goal of what I'm trying to accomplish here. After Israelite and Egyptian history have been synchronized, the reason we're doing that is to examine the Exodus Pharaoh's biographical sketch in order to determine whether this biblical figure not only meets the chronological requirement, but also meets the biographical requirements of the Egyptian monarch as described in the biblical account. Does he fit? Does the dating system fit? Do the people who were alive during that era fit? And so it has to fit in order for it to work. And there are two views that are dominant in the landscape for dating of the Exodus. There's actually four, but there's two that have any veracity, really. We learned four when I was back in seminary. The early date view is the 15th century BCE. And the late date issue is the 13th century BCE, about 200 years apart. And the candidate for the late date view is none other than the one you've heard since you ever watched the Ten Commandments and heard Yul Brynner say, Moses, Moses, Moses. So it shall be written, so it shall be done. Ramses II is the late pharaoh in the 13th century. He lived from 1290 to 1223 BCE. While the candidate for the early Exodus view is Amenhotep II. And he lived about 1455 to 1418 BCE. So almost 200 years earlier, 150. So you've got these two candidates that would fit this picture. And many scholars now date the Exodus to the 13th century BCE. And that's a step that I think requires a redefinition of concrete numbers in biblical passages that, if taken literally, would indisputably place the Exodus in the 15th century BCE, where I place it. And the eminent Egyptologist, biblical scholar Kenneth Kitchen is foremost among them. He said, quote, thus, if all factors are given their due weight, a 13th century Exodus remains at present the least objectionable dating on a combination of all the data, biblical and otherwise, and when those data are rightly evaluated and understood in their context. And so while Kitchen has been this major contributor in a field of Old Testament history and chronology, the accuracy of his conclusion is disputable. It is not the 13th century, and there's many reasons why it's not. And there was no 13th century Exodus, which originally was propagated by William F. Albright in the 1930s. I've got a bunch of Albright's texts in my library. And it's appealing to a reevaluation of the archaeological evidence that's pertinent to key Palestinian cities that were in question. Chronologist Roger Young, Palestinian by Roman definition, by the way, not by current definition. Chronologist Roger Young also opposes this trend. He said a date for the Exodus in the mid-15th century has been much maligned because of favorite theories that identified various pharaohs of a later date with the pharaohs of the oppression in the Exodus, the oppression being the enslavement of Israel. And it's hoped that the present study that I'm going to be presenting you, God knows how many nights, at least for tonight, that this present study is going to strengthen the case for the accuracy of the chronological numbers as presented in the Masoretic text And at the same time, it's helped to discredit theories which put the Exodus anywhere but the middle of the 15th century BCE. And so, since the early Exodus view is going to surface as the sounder view after we discuss these events, and already has in many other circles, just for us on this show, it's got relevant chronology matters. Amenhotep II's candidacy is going to be tested in great deal and to great extent in all this information I'm going to put forward. So, according to Mr. Mackey, says Sean Stroik. Mackey, who are we talking about? Drugs are bad, says Sean. Barbie D says, hi, I'm Sean. Oh, I'm hi, Sean S. I'm hi, H-I, Sean S. There you go. Sorry, Barbie. Niall says, I think the logical answer is that Amenhotep was representative of a grand movement of peoples, which it is unlikely he had a part in climate change, however. Unlikely he had a part in. That he was representative of a grand movement of peoples, which it is unlikely he had a part in. Climate change, however, did. Maybe those were some things. Maybe this was, Niall, an act of wills between the leaders of two people. One being the more powerful, and the ability to enslave the rest, and the others saying, no, we're not going to let you do that. Was there anything miraculous that took place? We don't know for sure. All we've got is the story. So we've got to look at who these people are. Amenhotep II was a real guy. Did he experience climate change? None that we know of during his reign, historically. There's no records during his reign that there was climate change of any kind. So it's going to be interesting to dig through this material and try to find out what exactly happened and why would he be a good candidate. So we have to answer these following questions to see whether or not Amenhotep II remains a viable candidate for the Exodus Pharaoh. As the biblical text is going to be scrutinized after being synchronized with Egyptian history. Does Amenhotep II qualify as the Pharaoh who lived through the 10th plague because he was not his father's eldest son? Now, by the way, Niall, that could be where perhaps your climate change, for lack of a better way to put it, argument or presentation might have something to do with the plagues. Maybe the plagues were brought about by climatological change. We'll dig into that a little bit. So, could the eldest son of Amenhotep II have died during the 10th plague? That's a criteria. It has to be true of the Exodus Pharaoh's son. Or does it? Did Amenhotep II die in the Red Sea, as the Bible allegedly indicates about the Exodus Pharaoh? It says all of Pharaoh's chariots were destroyed and his entire army. It doesn't say Pharaoh died. It just says all of his horses and chariots and men were killed in the Red Sea. Can any of Amenhotep II's military campaigns be related to the Exodus events? Can the loss of an exorbitant number of Hebrew slaves, potentially Egypt's slave base at the time, be accounted for in the records of Amenhotep II's reign? And is there any evidence to confirm that Amenhotep II interacted with the Hebrews after they left Egypt? So if Amenhotep II is the Exodus Pharaoh, could the obliteration of Hatshepsut's image from many Egyptian monuments and inscriptions be attributed to backlash from the Exodus events? Remember Hatshepsut? Talked about her many times. She was the female pharaoh. She would have been the Amenhotep is the son of Tutmosis III. Tutmosis III is the stepson of Hatshepsut. So Hatshepsut did not give birth to Tutmosis III. Her husband, her brother, Amenhotep the Tutmosis the second, had a child with one of his harem wives. That was Tutmosis III, who was the father of Amenhotep II. There you go. So it is said that Amenhotep II destroyed a lot of her images. Now, accordingly, the theory that I put forward is that she, being the Pharaoh just before the Exodus, during the time that Moses' life would have plugged in his first 40 years of life, that was that guy, Senenmut, over my shoulder, was the man that I think was Moses, and the man that she elevated to great heights, which could give some rise to the theory that she was defaced because she had part in raising him to power. We'll get into that. I might still try Himalayan mad honey. What's in mad honey, Sean Stroik? Is that still bee poop? Bee regurgitated? I'd like to try different kinds of honey. There's supposed to be some good stuff out there. I don't know much about Himalayan mad honey, however. Moving on. All right. There's 3 introductory background matters that I have to bring up with this. Number 1 is the reason for Moses' omission of the Exodus Pharaoh's throne name. Why did he omit that name? Why is it never mentioned in the writings of Moses? Why he omitted the name? That's a big question, isn't it? Because all we have in the story is Pharaoh said this, Pharaoh said that. At the end of the book of Genesis, it talks about how the Hebrews built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses, which we know for a historical fact were built by Ramses II, the late date of the Exodus, the famous Ramses. So if the book of Genesis says the Hebrews built those cities, or that city, Pi Ramses, would that not indicate that he was the Pharaoh of the Exodus? We'll get into that. Every time Moses wrote the dynastic title of the Exodus Pharaoh, it was devoid of the Pharaoh's throne name, like Sesostris or Amenhotep II or Tutmosis or so on, which is known in Egyptology as praenomen. This, however, was not the practice of later biblical writers, especially writers of the historical books in the Old Testament, who routinely transliterated each pharaoh's praenomen, beginning with the reign of Pharaoh Shishak. For example, Shishak is named in the Old Testament 7 times, though he's never referred to merely as Pharaoh. And the same is true of the Pharaoh Necho, whose name appears 9 times in the Old Testament. And the only exception to this rule, apart from the 21 references in the prophetic books of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, where the Egyptian monarch is referred to only as Pharaoh, is when the Hebrew authors retrospectively write about the Exodus Pharaoh, always leaving him unnamed. And so the question that arises is why Moses consistently omitted the throne names of pharaohs, especially in the book of Exodus. That's one of the first questions that has to be dealt with to try to figure out who this guy was. So omission of the pharaoh's throne name isn't theologically motivated. So the absence of Pharaoh's praenomen in the biblical history for the second millennium BCE is often used either to support the assertion of the legendary nature of the Exodus narrative or to demonstrate that the Hebrew writers just weren't really interested in history. And these criticisms, however, dissipate under a closer examination of the practice of Moses' day. Hofmeyr nobly suggests that the absence of the Pharaoh's name may ultimately be for theological reasons, because the Bible is not trying to answer the question, who's the Pharaoh of the Exodus, to satisfy the curiosity of modern historians. Rather, he says it was seeking to clarify for Israel who was the God of the Exodus, not who was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And so to support his idea, Hofmeyr appeals to Exodus chapter 5, verse 1, which he uses to suggest that Pharaoh not only rejects Moses' petition to allow the Hebrews to worship Yahweh in the desert, but rebuffs Yahweh by denying knowledge of him, setting the stage for a subsequent series of plagues in which Yahweh manifests his power both to Pharaoh and to Israel. And Moses thus avenges Pharaoh's reproach of God by leaving him unnamed. This is one of the theories that's out there. And Hofmeyr certainly is correct that Yahweh, or Jehovah, intended to demonstrate to the Israelites that he's the Lord, their God, and to show the Egyptians that he is the Lord over all of them, whether they accept him or not. However, Hofmeyr isn't justified in suggesting that the absence of Pharaoh's name is motivated by a desire to exact revenge on Pharaoh, since Exodus 7:5 clearly states that Yahweh's message was directed not toward Pharaoh, but toward the Egyptian people. Moreover, the battle that waged throughout the days of Moses' audiences with Pharaoh was not between Yahweh and Pharaoh, but between Yahweh and the gods of Egypt, who, during God's invoking of the 10 plagues, were proven to be powerless. And the God of Israel himself said, "And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am Yahweh." And so this conclusion, it's supported by the statement of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, later after he left Egypt, who had just heard a firsthand account of all the events. He said in this passage in the scripture, he says, "Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, because in the very thing in which they were proud, he proved to be above them." And Jethro understood the point. Yahweh resoundingly won the battle of the gods, and proving to both Israel, to Egypt, to the rest of the ancient Near East that were watching, that he alone is the divinity. That was what the purpose of the story was, not to prove who the Pharaoh was, but to prove who God was. All right. Now, another thing under this point, Pharaoh's throne name is omitted in accordance with the contemporary Egyptian historiography. Historiography. There we go. I don't know why that was so hard to say. So if Moses didn't omit Pharaoh's personal name for theological reasons, then why did he omit it? And the answer is found in the historical development of monarchical terms. The dynastic title, Pharaoh, derives from the word that literally means great house. So during Egypt's old kingdom, we're talking long before the Exodus, 2100 to 2700 BCE. The word Pharaoh was used as the royal palace. And it wasn't until someone during the middle of the 18th dynasty slightly before the reign of Tutmosis III, the father of Amenhotep II, was it used as an epithet for Egyptian monarchy. However, the standard practice of Tutmosis III's time was to leave enemy kings unnamed on official records. And so the campaign of Tutmosis III against a rebellious coalition at Megiddo, instigated by the empire of Mitanni, was fomented by the king of Kadesh on the Orontes River, who in the annals of Tutmosis III merely was called that wretched enemy of Kadesh, not by his name. And moreover, when the Egyptian scribes listed the booty, the booty, the scribes talked about the booty. They're not talking about the harem. They're not talking about the dancers. They're not talking about the treasure. But, well, they are in a sense. They listed the booty that was confiscated after the Battle of Megiddo, which, by the way, is in present-day Israel. They didn't name the opposing king, again, whose possessions the Egyptians plundered, referring to him only as the prince or the prince of Megiddo. Nile said, I was taught Moses was found in a basket floating down the Nile. So he was effectively an orphan with no literal family tree. That was just the outcome. It said his mother hid him for several months. They named his mother as his Hebrew mother, his Israelite mother. And she hid him for several months until he was too big to hide. And that she put him in a basket. Now, to have floated him down the Nile would have been out infanticide, because the Nile at that time was, of course, infested with crocodiles. You don't put a baby in a basket and float him down the expanse of the Nile. What does the passage, though, say? It says she made a basket and she smeared it with pitch, kind of a tarry substance, so it was waterproof. And she put blankets in and she put the baby in, covered it up. And it said that they floated him to where the princess was bathing, where her pool for bathing was. Now, that would not have been on the main channel of the river. It also says in the passage that Moses' older sister Miriam, who was probably, about 9 or 10 years old at that time, that she took the basket and placed it amongst the reeds on the banks of the Nile, which would be the channel, because right there was where did the Pharaoh's daughter find him? Right there by her pool. Her pool where she bathed. She was not bathing on the main river of the Nile, the main channel. And there was, if you know historically, that whole region, this would have happened probably in Menepher, which became known as Memphis, or current day Memphis, about 30 miles south of Cairo. And because going through Menepher, there was the Palace of the North was there, the northern Egyptian kingdom was there. The Pharaoh had palaces there. They dug all these channels crisscrossing the region. And there was the channels on the Nile that they dug were the major highways and roads in the ancient day by water. So one of the major canals went right through Menepher. And this is where it says that the young girl made sure the basket was placed, and she stayed and watched it to make sure it was okay. Niall says, has always sounded like a metaphor to explain his later tumultuous relationship with the river. I think that's stretching it, Niall, I do. Oh, we've got to find a way to make Moses not a real guy. Let's call him a metaphor in his relationship with the Nile. I think that's a stretch. because there's too much evidence that the man existed, and that he was found by the daughter of the Pharaoh. Um, all these stories. Now they didn't record these things per se, but the biblical story, the events of the biblical story, the people of the biblical story, all these little events that happen are all things that are documentable by finding out who these people were, where they were, what they were, so on and so on and so on. So I think eh, the one thing I would come close to on what you had to say, Niall, is that I believe, and I've heard a lot of people say, they used to argue and say, well, Moses' mother put him in a basket and floated him down the Nile. That's a lot like the story of Osiris, and put in pieces in a basket and floated down the Nile. That's just a retelling of that story. And I put forward, I haven't heard anybody else say this. And I thought, surely I'm not the only guy that's thought this. But I thought, remember the Israelites. If you look at them during the Exodus, the scriptural Israelites, there were very few people of what you could call Yahweh or Jehovah faith. There was a smaller percentage of them than there were people who were Hebrews by birth, Canaanite, Israelite by family, but that went along, they became Egyptianized after X number of years. And I think as slaves, we've got to reevaluate how they were looked at as slaves. These were a kept people, an enslaved people, but they also had their own cities. They also had their own places. You say, why would a mother float a child for any reason rather than consider an overland alternative? Because they don't live in 2024. They lived almost the opposite direction in BCE. The river was the major highway and the roads. And I think what his mother did was she deliberately brought that child to the spot on the banks on that canal that entered into the pool of the Pharaoh's daughter, where she would come every day to bathe in the river water. And the baby was deliberately put there, and there was a reason he was put in the basket. Because I believe Moses' mother was a person of faith, but at the same time very Egyptianized. She was playing, I believe, into the Egyptian myth herself, saying, you know how Osiris, one of your gods, and it was found in a basket? That's what I'm doing with my child. There was a reason for it. That's a risky move. Well, it was risky to let the child be known because they'd have killed it. So this was remember, this was a time when the Pharaoh who was on the throne prior, it would have been probably Tutmosis the first, Tutmosis the first. And he put out an edict that the babies would be, male babies 3 and under would be killed for a certain period of time. And because they said the Hebrews were growing too numerous. And they were there's that telling passage where he says, they're growing numerous and they're growing so fast that soon they might grow enough that they will rejoin with our enemies and try to retake our kingdom from us. That is an allusion to the Hyksos period, whom Amos the First had ousted. Amos the First being the father of Tutmosis the First. Tutmosis the First slaps them all. Amos the First slaps the Israelites in chains and slavery, or at least enslaves them, puts them into bondage for Egypt. And it was because they were part of the remnant of the people that had taken over northern Egypt. This is all stuff that's very interesting. And it starts to trail out. The tributaries of all this get very, very interesting. And so what you had happen was this Pharaoh enslaved people. These people grew up really Egyptianized. And I think the major if you're a slave and you don't have the same rights as the people, and she's trying to save her baby's life, to put him in a basket and put him by the pool in the reeds where the pharaohs are. It's not like they left him there overnight. Let's leave him there for 18 hours. No, it doesn't tell us how long he was there, but it says his sister was there to watch and make sure he was safe. And as soon as the Pharaoh's daughter finds the basket, the sister comes forward, Miriam. She says, I know this baby. I know where you can take him and get him weaned. And the Pharaoh's daughter says, you take him, have him weaned, and when he's old enough, I'll send for him to come back and live in the palace. And she adopted him. So it's very interesting. It's a risky move, yeah. It was risky to be alive back then. So putting the baby in a basket, I think that's like putting a baby in a cardboard box and putting it on the step of a orphanage, which also happens. That's a very risky move if you're not watching. So I think that's almost in essence what was done. Basket in the reeds on the Nile, ringing the doorbell. There's a baby here. So I think it was more like that. The Nile says, I was taught that Moses was protected by God as an act of faith. Maybe. I think so. On behalf of his mother, it was parallel with Job. I think they attribute faith to her, certainly. But I think there were also natural courses of events that took place. You can attribute faith to her, but I believe it was a natural course of events. Michelle Cannon-Free says, that's what I said, Scotty. I don't know what I said that you said too. Well, guess what? We're in the last 45 seconds of the radio version of this show. So I'm going to say to the radio audience, thank you for being here. Thanks for being part of the show. If you want to come over and join the captain's cabin, we'll talk about this stuff. Maybe Niall will call in and Michelle will call in. We'll talk about this stuff and discuss it some more. I think this is really interesting stuff. And there's more to come on this next week. So everybody, I want to thank you for being here over on the radio. And for now, I just want to say to you, come to the captain's cabin, live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid Radio broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep.
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Well, and welcome to the captain's cabin, y'all. Good to have you here. Glad you stuck it out and stayed over. We lost a couple of you, but hopefully we'll get you back. Let's see. What do we got here? I gotta put these on so I can read. Good night, Barbie D, if you're still out there and you can hear my voice. Thanks for being here tonight. Glad you made it in. And all of you, you can join me here. I'm going to give you the link. I'll copy it over. And let's talk about this stuff a little bit. I love this kind of history. We can talk about it. By the way, if any of you follows TikTok or has a TikTok or watches things on TikTok, I have a TikTok. And I've been using it exclusively to do tarot readings. I'm doing a card a day, a card of the day type of a thing. And I am going to just paste the link. If you're over on TikTok, there's all this controversy about it. And I'm just using it for what it's good for right now. As long as we got it. There you go. There is the link. You can go copy that link. I don't think you can click on it. You can copy it and go on over and check it out. So I've only been doing this for roughly a week, a little over a week, maybe 10 days, to do tarot readings online. And so I'm averaging between 700 and 800 views per day on those. And so we'll see where that goes and what it does. And I've got all kinds of stuff. I haven't even looked at this all day. So it's interesting. I got to look back at it. But I usually put them up very early in the morning, anytime between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. my time. I'll put that up. And so you can go over and take a look at the card of the day. They last anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes, somewhere in that range of time. So Sean Strike says, yeah, you said this before. No way you won't let your kids on it. Yeah, it's not, I'm not reading for kids anyway. So, yeah, there are things about TikTok I wouldn't want my own kids doing. Something I noticed, there's a whole hell of a lot of young women on that. And by young women, I mean girls that like my stuff and comment on it. And I go to look at their page and they're 16 if they're a day. So I don't even friend them. I just gotta look out for the impropriety of that. But there's a lot of adults on there as well. So hey, Kelly, good to see you, Kelly Bell. So you can come on over to TikTok, check it out. There's not too much Chinese interference on my page. So if you want to see tarot readings over there. Thank you, Michelle. I couldn't remember if you were on there or not. So thank you very much. And yeah, the music. Yep. The first couple of them I didn't have music. And then I said, hey, I got to add music to this. I think, you know what happened? I put music in accidentally the third or the fourth day, something like that. And I went, oh, where'd that music come from? That's kind of nice. It just like it did it all by itself. So yeah, it's been fun to get that up in there. And it's been fun to do those readings. Doing a 1-card reading every morning, or sometimes I do them late at night, and I save it until middle of the night, early morning. Then I put them up, and um, only takes a few minutes to go in, and it keeps me on my toes. And maybe one of these days I'll start doing some live ones over there, live reads, and anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes, something like that. You go live just like this and talking about it, a 30-second blurb about my TikTok, and it's taken 4 minutes to get it out. Talking tends to eat up time. So, hey Niall, how you doing?
Sorry,
There you are. That's okay.
Scotty, I was kind of goofing off there for a second.
No, that's all right. I
Gathering
just
my
saw you in
thoughts
the
and
wings,
stuff
so I
like
thought I'd just bring you in.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just caught the tail end of that. You're on TikTok doing tarot readings.
Just card of the
Yeah.
day type of thing.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah,
That was
I
kind of
remember
Rainy's
when we.
idea. Rainy came to me about 10 days ago, and she said, "Come on down to the studio. Let's record a couple of these. I think you should do this." And so she set up the camera, and she showed me how to get it done, and I just did it. So
Yeah.
so there you
Well,
go.
you've always been very self-deprecating when it comes to your tarot readings, because your tarot readings are very good.
Well,
I
thank you.
remember when I first met you, it must be 3-4 years. How long have we known each other? 3-4 years, something like
3,
that.
4, 5 years, something like that.
Yeah. And you used to do the 5-card readings, and they were
Oh,
incredible.
yes.
I used to remember them. I used to say, yeah, this is what your past is representing. This is what your present and your future, and they would all correlate to something that was happening within my day or within my life at the time. You stopped doing that on YouTube, and I totally forgot that you were very proficient in tarot card readings until I just heard that you are now doing TikTok. So yeah. Anybody who's listening out there, this man is one of the best tarot. He knows the tarot card inside out, and he knows the various correlations and differences between the tarot cards and the pictograms.
I may not get everything right all the time, but what I've learned that I can do, and I had some people who were very good at it when I was very early on in this, tell me that if that's what you are led to say about that particular card, or that's your interpretation of what that card means, go with it and make that card then your version of that card. Now, you don't want to change the meanings of what they are, but it's like a good, for instance, comes to mind, the Judgment card. The deck I had was different than some of the other decks. It always shows somebody standing by an open tomb. And the deck I had was done by Cat Black out of New Zealand. And she showed, I think it was the Golden Tarot where they had this. And they had an open tomb and a risen Christ coming out of the tomb in the background. And it wasn't in the foreground, it was in the background of the person there. And the idea that I started saying to people, the Judgment card, I like to call that the Resurrection card, because in relation to the risen Christ, the idea is that you've been battered, you've been beaten down, you've been executed, you've been killed, you've gone through the judgment, and now you've risen from that, you've resurrected from that, and the judgment, the price has been paid, it's done, it's over, all you have is the resurrected life. And I fit that into the meaning of the going through shit and then coming out the other end, is what the Judgment card stands for, and in a nutshell. And so that became kind of the way I interpreted the card. I see that card come up and I say, somebody's gone through some crap. if I see it in the reading, and it all depends on how if it's future, if it's coming down the pike, or if it's already happened, I look at that and I say, whatever your incident is here, whatever's going on, you've gone through some tough stuff, but you've been through it, and you're being resurrected from that.
Exactly. It's all about interpretation, as you say, Scotty. It's like I remember when you did a couple of readings for me. I took interpretations from them, which worked for me and made me think. Well, okay, the present is this way at the time, but the future might be this way if I choose
Right.
to go that way. And Scotty is more or less introducing me to a possibility of a way forward.
I
It's not
say,
yeah.
I always try to say the
Mhm.
future reads. I don't really like trying to read the future because it's unreadable, it's mutable, it's changeable. You can cough wrong the next minute, and you're going to change something in your future. So it's changeable. There's an idea that could stay there, but so I would always say, while the future is changeable, this is the energy. All the energy is pointing that to this possibility.
Yes, but it's
You can
also,
change.
correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also related to the last card that was drawn.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, so
or all the other cards
or
for
all
the
the other cards,
majority.
you know.
So
But I remember you did it for me twice, and it was quite profound because, without going into specifics, I think that it kind of said, well, yeah, this is where I'm at, and this is where I might be, and this is certainly where I was. And that was a good reading, open to interpretation. For me, it was absolutely true, because it wasn't like somebody like pulling random cards out and saying this means this. For example, if you'd have said, "Listen, now you're going to find true love next week," I would have been like,
right,
"Yeah, right," or it was very much, you put a lot of thought into what the cards were and how they interacted with each other within that particular deck,
yeah,
which I believe changes from deck to deck, and how you draw them is important as well. But I remember at the time thinking that you had a real understanding of the tarot decks, and without manipulation. You know, you just presented certain scenarios, scenarios of the past, scenarios of the present, which were very. I remember you talking very much about emotional stuff that
yeah,
that people might be feeling in the present, and a possible scenario of moving forward in the future.
yes.
And it was very effective. So
It
I
can
remember
be.
I remember thinking, "Hey, this guy is really got a handle on this." But then I forgot about it because you never did it again.
I did it
Yeah,
for a long time on Sundays,
yeah.
and I will be very bloody honest about it. The
Hmm.
reason I did readings was they were, first of all, they were enjoyable. I liked doing them. Second is that was a part of what I did for a living, was doing readings. And so I put it out there and said, "Hey, I'm going to do some free readings so everybody can come and get one. I'll draw you a card or two." And sometimes we did three. And I said, "And then if you like what you see and you need a reading, come and get a reading." And it's like with everything else online. I think I got a sum total of, in 3 years, 5 readings that people purchased. And so I stopped doing them online because I thought, I'm doing this like other people I know, like Sarah Soderlund, very good person. She she really needed a financial leg up in what she's doing, and she's very good at what she does. But she couldn't get people to buy one for the life of her, but everybody wanted to clamor for a free one. And there's a point with some of that stuff where you say, I'm good with it to a point, because if I'm offering it, it's there. It's there. It's good for it. But if I can't fit you in, call me up. Let's do one. And we've had a few people from the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something to it. I mean, I don't understand enough about the tarot deck and how it psychologically interacts with the user. But I will say that the way you presented it was very easy to. I think I'm not one of these people who's very gullible and hang on every word.
Sure.
But I'd say, well, yeah, I kind of feel like this now, and I certainly felt like this then, the way you would describe the card, and it's possible if I can combine my feelings now with my feelings then, that the results might be the feelings of the future card. So that's what I took from it. I think that's I'm not sure what you would call that in terms of tarot reading. It's not fortune telling. I think you'd be the first to agree. I'm not telling you fortune.
Right, right.
It's just I'm giving you some guidelines, which will. Some of it is taken from the universe. Some of it is taken from the readings that you see, what the cards represent, what they're meant to represent in that particular deck to you right at that moment for that person. And then, but it's up to the person themselves to draw the conclusions between the past, present, and future readings. So, in other words, you're not going to say, "Oh, listen, you're going to fall in love next week," or "Don't worry, you're going to." You're going to earn $1 million by,
what I find the
6
cards
months from
might
now,
do is tell you, hey, the energy looks really good for you falling in love next week. That doesn't mean you will. And by the way, Professor, I just have to say, your gong in the background is creating a perfect Byzantine type halo around your head. Oh,
that'll do wonders for his ego.
Oh, he's not hearing me. Yeah, he originally came up and he was totally white screen, so I couldn't bring him in. And then he popped up. Now he's.
I can't wait to make fun of him when he comes online. He says he has a halo behind him. He'll like that. Oh yes. Yes,
now the halo's lopsided over there. Off to his left, or right.
Surrounded by two guitars.
Yes, that's the wings.
I am the god of rock and roll.
There it is.
Hold on.
Oh,
apparently, I've got a audio problem.
There's whale sign.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
We can hear you.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing fine.
Doing fine.
I'm tired. I've just been tired all afternoon today. It's nice, but I will say this: is Sarah Yusuf out there? She sent me a message. I didn't see it till quite late in the game here, but she sent me a message private and just asking how I was doing, and I am happy to report I had to go do a blood draw today. It's just all this stuff, the tests from the last few weeks. And they just wanted to do I've got an endocrinologist I got to do a video meeting with next week. Just an update. And she said, I want you to get a blood test because I want to check out what your kidney function is doing and your this function and that function and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So then I got the blood test today. Test results came back. I was interested. My A1C for my diabetes is down again, which is very good. For me, anyway. I started my A1C, if anybody knows anything about diabetes, a few months back. I was at 12 points, and which is more than double what they want it to be. And that's kind of the deep set glucose reading. And so then I started bringing it down. I just started. I don't feel like I'm doing anything really superlatively different. Just watching it a little bit, what I eat, and making sure I'm more regular with the the shots I got to take and all that crap.
Listen, Scotty,
But-
you're going to feel fatigued all the time.
I'm
you know,
fatigued.
let's
I'm
face
just
it.
old. I
You know,
think that's old.
I have a no, with the diabetes and
Oh.
and the heart, you're going to feel tiredness hit you. Like I have MS, and tiredness hits me like a ton of bricks over the head.
I was
twice
sitting
a day.
here doing client work this afternoon right here, and I'm doing something, and I nodded off, and I went, I just fucking nodded off.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue. And, they've also got me on something for my heart that slows my heart rate down. So I average about 50 to 55 beats a minute. And so that makes me very tired. Not fatigued like I've been working out, just tired. It's like, at one point they cut me back. They said, take only half of those then.
Yeah, the way I put it with MS, the way it affects me, I think it's probably similar to the way it affects you, Scotty, is that MS, the tiredness is not like tiredness. It's not like you've gone for a long walk or you've been up all night. It's not that kind of tiredness. It's like all of a sudden somebody has tied like a load of lead weights to your arms and legs, and all of a sudden you're like this. And you're like,
I could walk upstairs and walk across the room, go get a drink of water. And I said, the descriptor, it feels like somebody has weighted my head down and would just pull right through my body to the floor.
Precisely.
And it's got that feel. And it's like, what the hell?
And that is not true tiredness. That is a symptom of whatever ailment it is. In my case, it's
and I try to
relapsing, remitting MS, which is an unfortunate byproduct, But at times, I'd be like, literally like this. I'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'd be like, and usually when I get like that, if I'm in company or something like that, I've learned to read the signs, so I don't seem like I'm kind of zoning out or anything. So I'll make my excuses and I'll have to leave. And that's how serious it can be, because it can be all of a sudden you can feel like somebody's giving you like 6 Xanax, in your drink. You just knocked it back or something like that. You just have to go away. You just have to take some time out and disappear from where you're at. But if I'm at home, I won't usually go to bed because I'd be there all day then, and then I'd get up and I won't know where I am. So I just let it go through me, and but that's because the signals from my nerves are being seriously eroded by my immune system. So the signals,
sleep in.
The myelin is being stripped away slowly. So it's time for sleep, time for bed. No, it's the middle of the day.
They give me meds to keep the liquid off my body from building up. So Lasix, they call them. And so I take those, and the only disadvantage to that is you got to pee every half an hour. And so it's like they say take them in the morning. Don't take them at night. If you take them at night, you'll be up all night. And it's just dumb. Because I could be walking, and it just goes, it's like, bam. It just hits you, you don't even get the 10-second warning. It's like, oh my God. If I do not find a toilet now, I may just pee my pants. And so I'm just open about it. If I'm in an office somewhere, I go, hey, can I use your bathroom? I said, I got to pee now. My meds.
And if they say to you, we don't have a bathroom, well, we might have a problem here. I've been in that position.
You got a Ziploc bag back there?
Yeah, it's surprising that
a trash can.
So anyway, Professor, how are you? We were just slagging you off a minute ago. You know what that means?
Well, I was giving you enough time to make sure you got that out of your systems before I jumped in and actually said something.
Oh God, he said that in such a patronizing way, didn't he? Didn't he, Scotty? Didn't he say that in such a patronizing way?
As if we were. Let you get your issues off your chest.
Talk about all these talk your meaningless dribble, and I'm about to launch into a monologue. We were slagging you off because you have a halo behind your head, which is the gong.
Yes.
The gong, yeah, it just kind of it happens to fit right where my head is, so I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'll go with it for now.
Yeah, exactly. It suits you, by the way. You know, I can just
But it
imagine.
says her son-in-law has MS. So
Yeah,
I had an art teacher in high school that had MS, and she was in rough shape for a long time. She passed away maybe 10 years after I was in high school, but yeah, she was.
it's a tough disease, Scotty, and I'll let you jump in now, Professor. But it is. I find that I can live with it once I learned how to understand exactly what's happening to my nervous system, and my nerves are basically being stripped of the myelin, you know, and the metaphor I always use is like an electrical cable, you know, that short circuits, you know. So the signals to my brain can be erratic. You can be walking down the road and all of a sudden your leg will just collapse. You know, it'll be like
Oh, yeah.
go numb and you'll be like, you know, you have to sit down or else you'll get extremely fatigued. We cover that. Or you get this shooting pains up your body or up your legs or up your extremities and all that kind of stuff.
My art teacher had it really bad in, probably more places in her legs, but she walked very stiff-legged and
Yeah.
stilted, you know,
Yeah.
gimpy. And so, yeah, that finally,
But we all have to find ways to live with our kind of issues. But for me, I understand my disease, so nothing surprises me, you know. So I can kind of, no, it does help that I live alone, to be honest with you. So I don't have people looking at me every day going, "What's wrong?" Because even my own family, they don't understand the disease because it is somehow deceptive.
Now, do you have, if you don't mind my asking, do you have physical traits? Do you like, is your walking affected? Is your anything like that? Or is
absolutely. I have to walk with a cane. But then I got put on some incredibly American medication just out of the States called Mavenclad, which is extremely expensive. And the MS doctors saw I wasn't doing very well. About 2 years ago, I basically
I remember
walk.
when you weren't doing so well.
I couldn't walk at all without the use of a cane. And even then, I could only walk a certain distance. And then I'd start to panic, and I would often collapse to the ground. So they said, "We're going to try this Mavenclad on you," and this particular medication is so expensive that you take it for 1 week within a year time frame. You take it for 1 week, one a day over a week, and then 2 weeks later you take the second week, so within a month, say, and then you don't take it for another 2 years. And for a year, during 2023, most of 2022 into 2023, I forgot all about my MS. I was jumping and running around the place without a cane. I didn't even think about it. I thought this is, it totally left my mind. Now, recently, in the last couple of months, it's come back again, as if to say, ha, did you forget about me?
Here.
And all of a sudden now the cane is back out, and I've been on to the hospital again. They said, you have to come back in. We have to review your medication. We might have to, because this medication is like a wonder drug for me. It worked for a year. He said,
that's great.
My consultant said Mavenclad is just out in the States in the last couple of years. It's the top of the top drug that you can get for MS, but we're still learning that people's physiology, we might have to alter the dose we get. So hopefully they'll put me back on, because I'm right back where I was, which kind of sucks. I had a friend I had to call a friend to do all my shopping and stuff this week, but that sucks. That's MS for you. But anyway, that's disease for you. But once you understand it and kind of come to terms with it, you have
to look at the bright side. At least you can get a cool cane.
Yeah.
If I had to walk with a cane, I'd be buying the most kick-ass, cool-looking cane. I could find.
Yeah, yeah. So what's up, Professor?
So, Professor, another thing that that gong does behind your head, it
Yeah.
makes you look like something I hoped to God I would never have happen to me as I got older. I remember in my 20s and 30s looking at older guys, older middle-aged guys, and they all had the same hairstyle. It was all the swoop, and they had this domey swoop. And so this makes it look like you've got a blonde hair. If I don't look directly at you, it looks like you've got this big domed swoop that goes back. And then you move and you ruin the illusion.
Well, I'm all about ruining illusions. You know that.
So what do you think about Moses?
That fictional guy that supposedly lived a long time ago.
Oh,
and
you are
was the
pushing
first
buttons
person,
on purpose, you bastard.
the first person to download instructions from the cloud to a tablet.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think it's a great story. I don't believe any of it, and I think it's been concocted and it's actually plagiarized.
From whom?
The Sumerians.
Oh, I think a lot of Genesis is plagiarized from the Sumerians.
Well, isn't that where Moses
But see,
is?
you know what I chalk that up
he,
to? The guy who
what's that?
wrote the first 5 books of the Bible would have had an education in Egypt, in the house of the nobles.
Well,
And
isn't the Torah, the first 5 books, accredited to
Yes.
Moses as an
Yes.
author? And he also wrote about his own death?
No, that's in his death was at the end of the last of his 5 books, which
Yeah.
you can only assume was picked up by the next guy,
Yeah.
Joshua, who was in charge. Probably Joshua wrote about his death. I would think that if I wrote an autobiography and I died at the end, and somebody go, "Oh, you can't publish this without the death in there. Let's put the death in." Somebody's got to write about it.
Yeah, it's just that, when you're authentic and have integrity about the content that you're creating instead of plagiarizing it from somebody else's work and efforts, the whole content creation theft model that has been afoot for too long because all the systems are broken and they can't handle it. But it goes to the issue about, original content creation and how that is something that has been a stalwart, the intellectual property, if you will, throughout history of people who have penned this, scrolled that, painted this, carved that, wrote whatever it was. It's interesting how the stuff that is so ancient has sovereignty and provenance that is it's empirical data. You can look at the Sumerian tablets, the Enuma Elish, and not only get the Old Testament, the Torah, but get a whole bunch more detail that was left out, and you can see where the intended selection of taking the words and the stories and repackaging them for the agenda of the time has been going on for millennia.
Well, to be fair, Robert, I think that plagiarism is as old as the hills themselves.
Oh, sure.
Everyone plagiarizes everyone else. You can lay the blame, for any civilization, on the downfall of the one before, and how they carry that forward and steal what they had, and
Well, and
we were just talking about that in chat about weren't we, Scotty, about Moses in the basket, and I was taught in school about they literally put Moses in a basket and floated him down the Nile and said, "There you go, you're on your own," and that kind of made sense because a lot of the the biblical scriptures tended to draw on that very extreme sort of devotion that you had to exclaim to God. So you have to sacrifice your child and then hope.
Even
with
passages
faith.
like that, though, this is where research and study pays off, because nowhere does it actually say she floated him down the main channel of the expanse of the River Nile. It says,
but she did go to the extreme of pitching the boat,
on the bank of the river,
of tarring the boat to make sure it was watertight. She went to that
Right.
extreme. Am I right? Yeah.
Yep.
So even though the baby was going into a tributary, that's still an extremely risky thing to do. So
Well, think of the analogy,
very-
Niall, of what we're going through and what we're seeing right now with this major thought meme and worm that is titled AI. Okay, and
I'm glad you brought it up.
as you guys have heard me rant on before, I have some very specific contrarian views of that, not only the technology itself, but all of the hype, hyperbole, sex, sizzle, and muss and fuss that's going on around this. The big deal right now is not necessarily the improvements of the accuracy and the speed and the depth of search, because all it is it's basically Google, Bing, Alexa, and Siri pointed at a whole new data set of information. So it's
That's
just
It's all fun and games, Robert, until Skynet starts looking for Sarah Connor. Okay.
There it is. There it is.
That's right. But to the issue of plagiarism, right now, OpenAI is getting its ass sued and Microsoft by the New York Times because the
Yeah.
content
Hey, Mark Eddie.
that they've made available in the search results and what's known as the natural language programming, NLP, that creates the prompt, which is analogous to what's your question? You type your question in a search engine, and it goes out and it finds whatever data it can. So the key there is that they went out and scraped intellectual property, original content, and copyrighted content without asking. And that shows up in the searches when you go in and use any of these tools.
I think the interesting
Midjourney
thing,
for
though,
art
is
is
that
getting
Moses,
sued for the
in
same thing.
penning these books, didn't have access to any of that stuff. What he did have was access to his education, and his education would have covered the Sumerian version of creation, the Sumerian version of the gods, the tale of Atrahasis, all these different stories from which Moses. Here's the question I myself have said: did Moses plagiarize these stories from the Sumerians, or was this another version of the same story? Micah Hanks and I were going to write a book. Oh God, 12, 13,
it's a
14 years ago
repetition of the
on
same
that
story.
very topic. The plagiarism, what was the original, what could you consider to be original stories versus several different versions of the same story? Why do you have 600 different flood accounts throughout all different kinds of tribal cultures, major cultures out there, different religions? They're all similar, but they all have different names. They have different events. They have different. Why do they have different events of the same thing or different tellings? I think what's important is to boil it all down to say they all have a common event.
That's a very good point. So I didn't want to interrupt, Robert, because
sure.
Is your main argument, Robert, the invasion of privacy here, or what is your point about this?
Well, you guys were talking about plagiarism, which is using somebody else's intellectual property that they were the original creators of. And I was using the analogy of not only Moses
Without crediting.
and Scotty. Yeah, Scotty, I would take challenge with what you just said as it relates to, did he actually just learn this from his studies and therefore incorporated it? And I think, the Sumerian version is over 1,500 years older than when Moses was supposed to exist.
It is. So when does copyright wear out? Is it plagiarized?
So did his copyright?
76 years was a long time before. That was, 1,424 years earlier.
So the point is, Jason brought up, is its attribution.
Yes.
Moses did none of that whatsoever. In fact, he made it into his own and claimed him to be the provenance of having this relationship with this dude who's apparently got a really hot mountain that burns your face and turns your shit white. I mean, when you break down, I mean, as a fantasy.
Well, that wasn't in the Sumerian version.
And then it wasn't. So when you it's
I just love
interesting
the
to
professor's cynicism.
when you listen
Yes.
when you listen to the story as just a story of some mythical, magical event that occurred at some time and is being told as it were true. That's great. I mean, that's what all of the big movies,
Well, that's the
the
beauty of
series.
4,000 years of retrospect. You know, back
Yeah.
then it was pretty fresh. So
Yeah, but the thing is when you break it
Hey,
down
Niall.
and you listen and you
I
go,
think
wait
you're
a
hot
minute,
micing.
who, me?
No, Niall.
Oh, Niall, yeah,
Where,
he's
where's
got
your
a hot
mic
mic
boom?
on.
What are you talking about?
Do you have a mic
What's
boom?
No. Are you
are
talking
you
about
hearing me hitting my rings on my cup?
No, the breathing.
Oh.
It's a very heavy breathing somebody into the mic. I just figured I'd let somebody know in case they needed to adjust their mic boom or their.
I don't think
And the only person where it wasn't going on was when you were talking. So I could be wrong, but I just figured I'd let you know.
Okay.
So the whole idea of looking at stories and in this very important transformative time that we're in, where the freedom of thought, the freedom of speech, the freedom to be who you are, regardless of how many different delineations of identity that have been offered and proffered, and that you either accept or deny. There's a major shift going on with trying to get to the truth of the origin of stuff. What is the actual origin? What stories are actually true, and which ones that we are told are true are actually not? Because we're going through the great reveal. Everybody's having a great rethink because we're about to go through the great rebuild. Because as I've droned on ad nauseum, as you gentlemen can all attest to, everything is broken. There is nothing in our culture, in our society, in our infrastructure, our architecture, our systems, and particularly the systems, because systems is where everything either works or it doesn't. And all of the systems right now are in complete chaos and are falling apart because they are broke. They no longer function for the efficiency, the efficacy of being an individual and expressing oneself as an individual freely within a community of like-minded, freely expressed individuals.
Sorry, I was wondering what he was sniffing on there.
I just spotted my flask. I think it's full of Midnight Moon. I don't know.
By the way,
Open the flask,
JP,
find out
Yeah.
if
I think you said I was breathing heavily, but by the way, every time you speak, it's your microphone is way too high, so it sounds like you're shouting into the.
Do you have like a sound activated mic on that, Jason?
No, but let me see if I can.
And you have a repeat also on your voice, so you
I'm
might
not
you might.
touching repeat.
I think you probably have YouTube open at the same time as the stream here.
Somebody does.
That could be. It does close.
I'm
Is
not
that
hearing
better?
the repeat from you.
Is that any better?
Yeah, you said your vocals are a bit lower because they were very loud. Yeah.
You sound about the same. For
Good.
me.
Yeah, I just went in and adjusted my sensitivity. That should.
Let's get. Can we get back to me, please? And
Of course.
Actually, I have a question on that. So, as you so eloquently pointed out, the going on ad nauseum about all these different things. So you keep talking about the great reveal, the great this, the great that, but and maybe look. I came out of a career field where all of our manuals were written at an 8th grade reading level. I'm sorry.
I thought it was 3rd grade.
No,
wait a minute. That's salesman. That's salesman. Sorry.
What are the indicators of a great reveal coming? And that's the thing is like I guess I don't understand. You keep alluding to the event that's going to take place, whether it's some sort of cataclysmic thing, whether it's some sort of just, all of a sudden all information is revealed, whatever it is, whatever it may be or manifest as. How is one supposed to pick up on the fact that there's a great reveal coming and all truth and knowledge will be unveiled to everyone? Because
So
Tic Tacs on a FLIR screen out of an F-18 doesn't tell me that we're hitting a massive.
Let me tell you
major
something,
reveal.
Michelle Cannon Free. I don't believe in all this ascension stuff that you're talking about. So, no,
So-
I was trying to do a
so-
visual
I
there.
just,
It didn't
I
work.
just,
in
and like,
answer,
Keep
I know I'm
talking.
kind of tongue in cheek and humorous about it, but that's the thing is, like,
Yeah.
a lot of times I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to or what these signs and
Yeah.
symbols are, and there might be some viewers out there who aren't, quite picking up what you're putting down.
So, and I appreciate that. I need to clarify that there is no single event. There are a multitude of events and a process that's going on.
Okay.
So the end result will be the great reveal, the great rebuild, the great rethink in the midst of all of that, trying to figure out how do we fix all the stuff that's broken.
So what's the processes? Can you bring it down into like a list of 10, since you said it's like a whole plethora of things going on? Can you give me
Oh, give
the
me
Intrepid
7.
reading level guy?
I mean, yeah, exactly. What are you talking about here? Carl Schwab and that kind of reveal? What?
No. Much the things that I'm referring to are above all of the theater that we see in the feeds of information that are known as traditionally the mainstream, which I refer to as legacy media. The best way to answer that question, I think, is by asking the following question. Can you name something that is working right now in its optimal form and is not broken?
Yes,
My
us,
coffee maker.
us, human beings.
My coffee
Human
maker.
beings? That I don't know.
No,
I don't know
I'm
now.
sorry. I meant
Oh, you're
human
referring
My
beings.
to
coffee maker just
universal-
knocked it out.
I'm sorry, I
That is
misheard
not
you.
bad.
I thought you meant can you name something that is not operating in
You're talking
human
about
beings.
universal entropy there, though. Everything is born to decay.
Right.
And all we can do is slow it down a little bit or enjoy it while it's going. And
So,
Well,
are
see,
you talking, Professor? Are you talking singularity? Are you talking
No.
transhumanism?
No.
What are you talking?
I'm talking about when we think about how we function in our daily life, from second to second, minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, okay? All of the things that we do during that time that we use, whether it's the food that we buy, which is completely polluted and crap, the pharmaceuticals and the drugs that we are prescribed, which are complete crap, our medical system that has defined all of that shit, complete crap, our government systems, complete crap, the education system, complete crap, the judicial system, complete crap. Every one of these systems they're broken beyond repair. They cannot be fixed. They are, Scotty, I agree that systems or things have a shelf life, but I don't agree with the word entropy. I don't think entropy actually exists scientifically, because entropy means it's something that eventually completely loses its heat. Second law of thermodynamics. It eventually dissipates the energy that may
interchange the
animate
word
it.
decay. I've always said I'm an entropic being. We are all subject to entropy. We all devolve into nothingness, except
Only
for
our
energy.
bodies.
So
Only our bodies.
yes,
Right.
physical bodies. So,
So what is
So those are
what is the great reveal? Not to
great.
put you
Well,
on the spot.
what's
so-
being revealed?
So, first of all, there should be an easy revealing of what I just said. Every system that we use in order to function and be in society and interact as a productive, positive, carbon-based unit in that, all of the systems are broke. And until you stop and you look at them, and you won't see that the entire system is malfunctioning. Why is that, you ask? Because that should be the next question. What is it? First of all, if you need to clarify that any of the things that I mentioned are broke, you need to go look at it just for about 10, 15 minutes and the data that's in it, the activities that are going on, all of the stuff. Science, for example. Back in 2015, a major report was put out that did a study on all the peer-reviewed papers that had been peer-reviewed, i.e. consensus, of a particular subject and then were published in the esteemed authoritative journals, over 90% of those papers could not be replicated. It's known as the replicability problem. Our science has been so screwed up. It's been so infiltrated with ideologies and, most importantly, money. Because if you want to, every time somebody says, well, you need to follow the science, every time I follow the science, all I find is money. And I find corruption. And I find that as a result of those two things, the data that's being proffered by these institutions, these think tanks, these knowledge stacks, is wrong. I've noticed for the last 15 plus years of all the different dives I've done into different knowledge domains, that 50% of the information I find in there is questionable. The other 50% is either wrong or complete or missing. And this is part of what I'm calling the Great Reveal. All of the systems are broken for very unique and specific reasons, depending on what they are. But at the root of all of them is an ideological, basically corrupted, money-fueled set of information and authorities and the constructs with which that information is managed. So we're finding out that our science is wrong. We're finding out that our health system is wrong. We're finding out that our financial institutions are wrong. The entire financial system is broken. That's why you're hearing all the stuff about this replacement
So everything
currency.
is wrong and broken.
Exactly.
So would it be fair to say that the Great Reveal could be equated to effectively a great resurgence of self-awareness within humanity? And when I say self-awareness, I mean humanity realizes, you know what, we're where we're at because we have become apathetic about politics. We have become slaves to consumerism. We have, become slaves to technology. So when
We've become intellectually lazy.
Well, and of course, this is nothing new. You
Right.
look at civilizations that fell 2,000, 4,000, 8,000 years ago. Those civilizations fell for some of the same reasons they fall today.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this, Scotty.
Or have we always been this way?
Well, that's my question to you is you gave an example that's over 2,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have one that's more recent, say in the last century or two?
Example of what?
The great civilizations falling.
Oh, well, I think we're in the middle of one right now.
But there hasn't been anything like this in history is part of my point. We are more connected with there's more people and more connectivity, more interaction.
And I think that connectivity and interaction is something that has really precipitated it. If you look at the way, let's see, use as example, the way we surveil. The way we surveilled and did police work 50, 80 years ago is night and day to the way they can do it today with modern technology. You look at when did DNA first come onto the scene as being something that was usable to determine crime scenes?
It was in the late 80s, early 90s, and then the Human Genome Project became a big deal. Then it fell flat on its face.
It was available long before that in the early 80s, but it was extremely expensive and used in the context of
you had somebody
medical
murdered
research.
in 1917. Could they have traced their DNA? No, we didn't know anything about it. So we have made advances, but sometimes those advances have made us so overridden by the advance. Say, for instance, what might it be? Let's say you got pulled over for a speeding ticket 70 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
70 years ago ain't as long ago as it used to be. 1949, 1950, you got pulled over for speeding. Hey, I'm going to have to see your driver's license. Oh, that's good. Did you know you were going a little fast? I followed you and I had you at roughly about this speed. I got to give you a ticket for speeding. Could they call in back then? Did they have computers in their car? They could call the office on their radio and say, you got anything on this guy? and they might not be able to access it. So we're overrun now. Take that into simple daily chores.
We've got an older
No.
white male, gray
Yes.
hair, beard,
Beard?
probably roughly somewhere in his 60s, wearing a black shirt. APB, everybody.
APB. But of course, nowadays, this spills over even into the quote unquote the innocent things of life. Your medical records, your purchasing habits, your what is the Biden administration was pushing the wanting to tax. What was it they were trying to tax now? Everything they wanted access to all your financial information. And
The trade was it $600 or something like that. Was the cap they were wanting to?
$600.
That was the $600 on something that was, money to you, and it was not 1099 or should have been 1099. PayPal tried to do it.
And
they
it's
got
like,
a bunch
because
of
right
pushback,
now,
and they finally had to.
The last 40 years, you could fudge on your taxes a little bit. That was just part of life. Seeing how you could cheat the government a little bit.
Well, they get one over on us.
But no, it'd be things like, I'm not
Scotty,
going to claim that $247 that I made under the table selling cigarette butts to whoever over the last year. So that
Scotty,
$230 is going to remain unclaimed. Well, now
what I'm talking about is deeper and simpler.
Yes.
For example, just on the point you're making, why are we paying taxes? Why is there a tax system?
It's supposed to be to support the government that you put into place.
So,
build
but that's
roads, support defense, provide for the common good.
So I still don't understand, Robert. Are you an anarchist? What are you talking about? Basically?
No, I'm a humanist, and at a minimum, I'm an individualist.
Okay.
So
you want the breakdown of everything. You want everything to collapse because it's not working. But
well, see, let me try to clarify, because that's not what I said. That's not what I said.
But you did say that nothing is working.
Well, it isn't. You don't have to be an anarchist or any ist to look at stuff and say, well, that's not working very well. What I'm saying is that everything is clearly broke by any objective, reasoned, critical thought observation. I mean, you can't look at anything right now and tell me that everything is collectively. But my point is that
what's your alternative? It's like
to fix it, and that's what
is it all broke, or is it all things that we every day we get up and we have to work at making things work well? My family would be broke if we didn't work at it every day. My car would be broke if I didn't put oil in it every day.
No, what I'm talking about are the fundamental constructs that make up our societal habitat that we inhabit. I'm talking about all of the fundamental structures of the way that we humans think about the reality that we inhabit, how we interact with it. How is it made? Where does it come from? Are there UFOs? Is there a free energy? Is there free water? Yes, all these things are real, but they have been on the fringe of the constructs of the fundamental experience that we all have been inhabited, or that we have inhabited. And we have been programmed intentionally to think the way that we do, like you went on about taxes. To me, the questions need to be asked are, why do we have taxes? Why is the government system the way it is? Why is the legal system the way it is? I'm talking about fundamental
I think
building
that's
blocks.
Broken because taxes were supposed to be used to fund the government that you put in place. Now,
but did you know you can have an economy that would fund the government without taxes? Did you know that?
Say again.
You can have a robust economy that is based on free enterprise.
You're talking about personal tax or tax on goods and services or any tax?
I'm talking
whatsoever.
about taxes, period. You don't need to have a tax system in order to fund an infrastructure for a society or a civilization.
So
you don't need
that economy model. That economy model, you would have corporations, companies, businesses, organizations, etc., who would own a square city block of road. They'd pay to maintain it. They'd fix it using the funds that they get from these services or goods that they provide for whatever form of currency you're using.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
What happens?
But then
what
you've got
happens
the government producing goods to sell.
Well, the whole
that's not the
question
place
of
of government.
the whole question of governance, or in the form of governments, is up for grabs, because in a totally free enterprise, sovereignty and provenance of the individual environment. And what I mean is that you own your data. Right now, you don't own your data. It's like when you were talking about the surveillance stuff. The data that is about you and your construct of the sovereignty of your individualness, that is scattered across hundreds, if not thousands, of different systems that none of us own. And unless we remember our passwords, we can't get to it. But it's us. That system is wrong. If you took everything and gave the individual the ownership of themselves, and then allowed people of like minds to create what are termed self-organizing collectives or self-organizing communities.
It sounds like a disaster.
Well, it's because
It's wide open for discrimination, and cults.
And how's discrimination working out in our society?
Tribalism.
How's that working out in our current system, Niall?
It's not. The problem
everybody has to be discriminating. There's nothing wrong with discriminating unless you're being discriminative.
I mean,
what you're talking
about, Robert, is a pipe dream. It's not something that's ever going to happen.
I discriminate every day.
What can happen
that you can and can't wear that to school. I discriminate. You cannot wear that. I discriminate. You cannot watch that. I discriminate. You cannot cut across George's yard because he wants his grass kept nice.
Is that discrimination, though?
So, what's that?
Is that discrimination?
No, you have to be discriminating. So,
the problem is there's a number of things that Robert touched on. You could take into account, chaos theory, quantum mechanics, transhumanism, which I happen to be a fan of. I think some of the technology is extremely interesting for humans. I believe that the human species is fundamentally neurotic. Mm-hmm. We always look for something outside ourselves to save us, or to organize us. We blame everything except ourselves. We blame the government. We blame.
Why is that?
Yeah, because we're neurotic.
My problems are my own. I can tell you that.
And no other species operates like humans do. We're very self-absorbed. We're obsessed with the religion. We're obsessed with this whole idea of elitism, of being top of the food chain. Of being whisked to heaven. I enjoy these conversations because I don't take everything from the Bible literally. I just can't, But metaphorically, you will notice that all these stories tend to repeat themselves. And we all like the idea of iconography. We all like the idea that there is some.
Well, there's only 5 original stories to humanity anyway. It's just all the variations and spins we put on them.
There is a consciousness, or an entity who is kind of looking out at us and saying, well, human beings, we're all a bit fucked up in the head, but, there is hope for them. But, we can't do it ourselves. We certainly can't do it ourselves. And the whole idea of, there's been various groups over the years who have tried to do what you're suggesting, Robert. They're called cults. And we all know how that ends.
They're called what? Cults. Yeah. Well, there's some truth to that.
Niall, I appreciate your perspective, but I just have to tell you are so dead wrong. I couldn't make that
I knew you'd say that.
More specific. Just like you were saying that what I'm talking about could never happen. I would simply ask questions as to why. And all of the other issues that you brought up about the neurotic nature of the nattering nabobs that makes us who we are, that's programming, okay? So my point is that the freeing of the individual, the true transhumanism which is the transformation into the self. Technology, yes, I'm a geezer geek. A lot of the stuff that's going on is going to make fundamental changes technologically to our biology. And med beds, light, sound, frequencies, there's all kinds of incredible things that are coming up. Nanotechnology as well. And I believe that those will find their place. But if they're not controlled by the individuals, if they are allowed to function and manifest in the current systems that we have, you will have the dystopian Terminator nightmare that you think will happen, in my view.
I totally
Okay,
disagree.
and
First
I
of
know
all,
because I'm deep in this tech.
Yeah, there's been way too much talk about the Terminator as a movie, right? A franchise,
Yeah.
Transhumanism
I prefer Star Trek.
is not, as you
Without
said,
communism.
Robert. It's not being integrated within ourselves. It's been integrated into something else. It's been integrated into technology.
I understand the use of the term now.
No,
what I'm saying is the term is
listen to me.
wrong.
No,
the
but
term
you
is
can't
wrong.
say that because
Yes, I
Well,
can
I
say
think
that.
he
I just
did.
did.
No,
It's
I
called
know.
free. It's called free speech, and it's called having my own mind. What I'm saying is that the terminology, like you're using, is all programmed bullshit. And I'm not calling you bullshit. I'm saying the words. All of it has been mangled
I will
and
only take issue
manipulated.
with you on this one thing, Professor, and that's who's to say your version of that isn't bullshit.
I'm just that. What I'm
You
saying is that
you have the freedom
I'm.
to say what you want to say.
I'm
Just like none of us,
exactly.
or I do, or Jason. But
I'm not
who's
saying
right?
that
Come
what
to
I'm
Jesus.
not saying anything other than I think the words need to change.
Sure.
And I'm trying to tell you that your interpretation of my use of that word is not based on my definition. And you're not listening to me, so I can tell you why I think your use of the term is wrong, because my use of the term I think is more accurate. It's just like the disclosure movement. It's not about disclosure, it's about exposure. It's just like this other thing that's going on. Everybody's been brainwashed. No, they've been brain stained. And
You
what
were
they need
talking
is a
about
good
what's at the
brainwashing.
core and the heart of marital relationships. If my wife just had the logic I had, she would obviously see that I am always right.
Right?
And, so this is the risk we run with all this. We think things through a certain way, through a certain perspective. Your perspective, now I'm not labeling this as your only way of thinking, but say, take the historical story of Moses. You think it's mythology. I think it includes mythology, but there's a historical tale at the core. I think that there is archaeology to be found. I think religions can take the same story and say, archaeology be damned, it's what God and Jesus are doing. So there's all these different perspectives of the same thing and saying, well, mine's right. No, mine's right. No, yours is right. No, mine is. Let's go to war. And that's what causes war, I think. We're never going to get around that. We're never going to get around the degradation of culture.
Well, the point, though, Scotty, is all I'm trying to do is say that I have a different subjective perspective than the official narrative, and I'm trying to explain what that is and why. Now, all of us have nothing more than the speculation that we carry from our own experiences. There is no other truth other than what we know personally. So everything is speculation. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that I'm correct. What I'm saying is that...
Well, it kind of sounds like you are, to be honest
well,
with you.
that's why I'm trying to help clarify it. What I'm saying is that your use of the term, transhumanism in particular, I have a different definition. And I'm trying to give you that definition so that you don't think that I'm wrong about transhumanism.
Transhumanism. I don't care.
I think that everybody... well, the thing is everybody's got their own definition, whether it's been assigned to them, whether they've adopted it, or they've created their own. And I'm simply trying to say that I want to create a different way of thinking. And I'm doing it by using the terms that are currently in vogue, and I'm analyzing them going, well, that definition doesn't make sense to me, or it has these issues. So I'm going to use a different definition to try to explain my experience and how I see things. I'm not saying I'm right in any way, shape, or form. It only sounds that way because I'm very definitive in the language I use, and I'm very specific about making sure I get my point across. Don't confuse that with thinking that I'm right or that somebody else is wrong. I'm simply saying I have a different way to look at things that I think is more holistic and more accurate, and here are the reasons why.
And
You're
I
the
was saying
judge as
it's
to whether
the
I'm right or
same,
not.
the same exact argument I use when my wife and I go at it. I say, look, I have put brain power into this. I have figured out why this does that and that does that, and why notch A goes into slot B. And here for the laughs and rants.
I can't read that, so I'm not sure. Is that
Oh.
what did you say about me a minute ago?
Oh.
Where's that one?
It says bets, and then it says the professor versus Nile. And when you guys were,
What are
I was
your
just
odds?
going to see what
Yeah,
people
yeah.
were going to say in the chat.
Place
You know,
your
maybe we
bets.
get a little pool going. I don't know.
I thought it said "shut up, Niall." I was like, "What?"
No.
Yeah.
I would
It
just
didn't
tell
say
you
shut
that.
up, yeah. So yeah, I think, like I say, with my wife, I can lay it all out logically. My wife doesn't think logically. Sometimes women tend to not think logically, think with emotion and feelings and passion and so on in
Sometimes.
general. And it's funny how in the last 50 years you've had to now add the words in general. It's the way women and men are wired differently, so we think differently. So I can use that same argument you've got, Professor, in a marital dispute, and it doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't mean I won't come out, having sex that night. Well, what's the meme? It has a stick man. He's sitting there, and he's pointing at himself with his thumb. He said, what was it? He said, what was it about pancakes and sex? Something about what had pancakes this morning but no sex? This guy. It's something like that. I can't think of what it was. But, it gets us into that whole thing. So, is there a truth? Are we looking for truth? Are we looking for fact? Archaeology. To quote Indiana Jones, you should know this one, Jason. Archaeology works for
It's on the other side.
There it is.
Missed it by that much.
What did Indiana Jones say about archaeology? Archaeology is not the search for truth; it's the search for fact. He says, "You want to search for truth? Go down to so and so Professor so and so's class down the hall."
Right.
His
Philosophy class. Yeah.
down the hall.
Well, see, this goes back to the original question that Niall and I think Jason asked originally. What do I mean by the great reveal? The things that we're talking about here, the words, for example, that we just went through, and how I was trying to put forth my different definition of these terms, is a part of that reveal. What we're seeing, it's a process of things that we were told. We're finding out facts that go against the truths that we've been told on any subject, any domain knowledge. As I was mentioning, they're all broken. Well, why are they broken? Well, most of it has to do with the fact that their truths are not based on facts. So we're starting to see facts, and this is something that happens when, as you said, Scotty, you put the brain power into something, and you look at it, and you reason with it, and you investigate it, and you analyze it, and you go through the scientific method, the processes of figuring out why something is the way it is. When you get in there, you find out that it was at one point it meant this, at another point it was hijacked, mangled, and manipulated, and now it means that.
I think
there's all kinds of not only examples of that, but our history is all wrong. What we've been told of what's happened over X period of time and space has been severely manipulated. It's nowhere near the truth of what really we're starting to see. So that is a part of the great reveal.
I think here, and I would say about history, I think history has got a pretty good overall story to it but you got to dig out the part of the archaeologist, the anthropologist, combine that with the philosophers, whatever, is finding out why Caesar did what he did. We don't know that. It's not always recorded, or why this leader did that, or that guy did that. We don't really necessarily understand that. We know factoids about history. And then those factoids can be changed up when we start finding out why they wrote things the way they did, or what really happened on that day.
You know, there's a fear. There's a fear to do that, though.
There is.
Because if you dig and you find something is incorrect, it could destroy a more fragile sense of self, sense of reality that someone has.
Exactly.
It could completely destroy that. One of the examples that I like to use when talking about that kind of fear, and the reason why this example sticks in my mind is because I went and saw it at the Chester Fritz Auditorium on Wednesday. Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
It is an examination of the humanity and the human element of the Passion story, not the divine. Are there elements of the divine that enter into it? Yes, of course. But it's told from a human perspective and trying to, what's going on through this? Nobody wants to think about those things. And that's why there's a lot of hesitancy with people that I know who are a little bit more, have a bit more of a religious bent about going or listening to that. Well, there's something blasphemous about that. No, there's nothing wrong with examining this aspect of a person or persons that this stuff is centered around.
Absolutely, and that's why the Last Temptation of Christ got into a lot of trouble for exactly the same reasons.
Right.
Because they tried to introduce the humanness of
I'm not sure
of
we
Christ.
needed the whole scene of, Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
I don't know, they didn't get it right, but the idea was there,
The idea was there, yeah.
I mean, personally
Good idea,
speaking,
poorly executed.
I have no problem. I have a sort of faith, but I happen to believe that Jesus was a mystic who did exist, but I believe he was a mystic. I do not believe he was the son of the universe or the son of the creator or anything like that.
And now, what are you basing that opinion on? How did you come to that point?
Well, it's just personal logic, Robert. Just personal logic. I mean, if this creator, if he wanted to really make a statement, he wouldn't have sent a guy down onto a hill and sprouted a few words to a few thousand people.
Why do you think that would?
Because it hasn't worked. Because it hasn't worked. Because
based on what information?
Oh, Jesus Christ!
All it's done.
He would have reached a whole nation. Israel and
just let me finish.
Don't get me wrong.
If God had this great plan to send down his son to sacrifice him, so we would learn something, we haven't learned anything, and he hasn't made an appearance since. So it was like, it's like one of those comedy sketches. Let's try this. How's that worked out? It hasn't really worked. Okay, everyone's bombing each other and killing each other, and the religions are just, they hate each other, and
they were doing that 4,000 years ago.
Exactly. I sent down my son, in the hopes that it would work out. Then they nailed him to a tree, and they thought everyone would love each other and everything would work out in the end. But sorry, it was a failure. We'll have to work on that one. It just doesn't logically make sense to me personally. So I think Jesus was obviously,
I think the whole message that's been watered
a mystic, and maybe he had some incredible insights from the consciousness of the universe that he, which by our standards today would seem quite obvious, but at the time would be extremely profound.
I talked about a long time ago this whole,
and love and humility and all these beautiful concepts.
this
But
whole
he was basically a mystic.
evolution of the way we view God. I don't have it all forward in my mind right now, but it started millennia ago with the first concept of God. I think was something, there is some kind of force out there. Well, I know as they evolved it, he's the force in the thunder. That's the God of the thunder, the God of the mountain, the God of the object in the thing. And then it came down and they started making, well, why did rulers become gods in their own, the Egyptian culture, Assyrian, all these, because the ruler is a representation of God for our people. So the ruler became an entity, a godlike entity. And it kept getting a little further away from that original concept, this evolution of who God was, the more we as people developed what we wanted God to be. And eventually it ended up with, you now have the personal God, the God who welcomes you with open arms. He's not the God of the mountain anymore, or the lightning or the earthquake. He's the God that takes your crap and welcomes you with open arms and puts his arms around you.
And
You
that
know,
is
this just
an
reminded me.
individual thing. That is
Just
a
reminded me
personal
of
thing.
something.
Say that.
Oh, I was gonna say this. Just that this kind of just reminded me. A few years back, I can't remember if it was like 2 or 3 or if it was 5 or 10, but a while back there was something about how they had found documentation that basically heavily implied or confirmed, depending on what camp you sit in, that basically the New Testament, Jesus, all of that was a psyop, if you will, planted by the Roman government.
Oh, you're talking about Joseph Atwill and Caesar's Messiah.
This would be the Herodian, not the Herodian, the well, it's like this thing, Paul.
Are you talking about X?
Paul hijacked
That
Christianity.
was the Middle Ages.
Well,
and,
in Joseph Atwill's
Caesar, or,
in
Nero.
Joseph Atwill's Caesar's Messiah, which there's both the documentary on YouTube as well as the book, and he's got a bunch of interviews out there. He's kind of like Mauro Beliggio, who's done the Naked Bible. Both Joseph's works and Mauro's works clearly demonstrate that there was a long lineage of like you were saying, Jason, that the whole Christianity thing was actually a psyop made up by the Romans. And there's a boatload of documentation on that, which Joseph goes through in his Caesar's Messiah. Mauro Beliggio in the Naked Bible shows all of the original words and how the translations have been completely screwed up for centuries, and shows that there's never the word God in the Bible anywhere. Yahweh was an Elohim, and he was a mid-level sergeant kind of guy that ruled over a certain region. And so these names and the way that they are portrayed in this book have been exposed. Again, another example of the great reveal.
I'd like to know his source material on that, because it's certainly not in any of the
Go look it up, Scotty.
So there's external sources.
All of it is impeccable, researched, empirical data. And it's all over YouTube. There's all kinds of interviews out there. Look him up. I'll send you a couple of links.
The basic rundown from what I was, it's like, it was one of those things I remember clicking on. It's like, and you only got to read so much. And then it was like, hey, pay $29.95 for the book.
Paywall,
whatever. Right. Yeah. And, but basically the gist is that seeing the civil unrest that has been building within, Judea and that whole region, everything else going on with the Roman Empire, they're basically like, look, how do we avert a massive war and a massive uprising? Well, we have these people, the Israelites, the Jews, the Hebrews, who are waiting for a Messiah of some sort, to deliver them. What if we give that to them, but it's not the warlike Messiah that a lot of people were hoping for or expecting. It's one who brings a message of peace. And if we can bring the temperature down through this, we can maintain peace and stability in the region and we won't have any more problems. And so, according to this, Jesus is basically a plant by the Roman, Roman Empire.
The only reason I would say that's unlikely, JP, is that Judea in those days was an outpost of the Roman Empire. I mean,
Right.
an extreme outpost. So it wasn't that important to the Roman Empire at the time, you know. So the fact that they had to instigate that within that region would be extremely unlikely. They had much more further interests, you know, within Europe and in other areas of the Middle East, and not in Judea. So unless they were using it as some kind of, as you say, psyop,
which, I mean, like, honestly, coming from a a military background and seeing how they do things and studying things,
they would have been way ahead of their time if that was there. You know,
I don't even necessarily even think that it would be something to be considered way ahead of their time. You just got somebody who understands how people think.
I mean, you have to think
nobody can be ahead of it.
At the time, at the time, being they had their garrisons were extremely small in that area. You were at the furthest reaches of the Roman Empire. I really don't think they cared about examining those things. And also, at the time, the Roman Empire itself was under severe pressure elsewhere in the world, so that they had their plate full with massive wars all around the globe. So
that defends the idea, though, of doing something like that. Because if you can put one person in some place to quiet something down, or a small group of people to quiet something down, you no longer have to worry about what's going on your rear flank or your left flank, or however you want to look at it, and you can focus all of your attention on the bigger issues.
Yeah, I would agree with you, except for the fact that information was very slow to spread itself in those days.
Well,
so
I've heard a very interesting hypothesis.
It might take a year for a message like that to land on some senior consular's desk, in Rome.
Yeah, and I've heard an interesting.
For 3 years, seemed like 30.
I've heard an interesting hypothesis based on recent research about how it took like 500 years for the Roman Empire to finally fall. And one of the reasons was the barbarian attacks on multiple different fronts. So these are small communities looking to affect change. And part of what had happened with the Roman Empire is they got apathetic, they got lazy. They got fat, dumb, and happy in their conquest of being who they were and the way that they had transformed whoever they had conquered. So that they became this lackadaisical, hey, we're good the way we are. In the meantime, these hordes from all over the place, the Huns and all kinds of folks, decided to come in and start poking around at the edges. And they finally made enough of an intrusion into the then empire to where it just collapsed under its own weakness.
Yes,
so
I agree with that 100%, Robert. I agree with that 100%. And
I think that makes a lot of sense.
The proof is in the pudding. What happened to the Roman Empire is that they were atomists, basically, materialists. The intellectuals were. So they didn't believe in anything. So what they used to do was take over a country and steal their iconography, and they'd make them their own.
Let me just respond to Wesley.
And then they'd integrate their iconography into their own.
I'm going to respond to Wesley. Wesley, you're always interesting, but no time to talk to Allah. Not tonight. We've been talking about everything else. So, and we're just about wrapped up for tonight. As far as You really made Jesus angry for not telling the vision. I don't know that because he didn't tell me that. He didn't tell me I made him angry. So I don't really know that. I think what we're talking about is what you're showing, Wesley, is that everybody's kind of got their own view of how things work. I might have had a vision about something too. It doesn't, how do I know my vision's right? I don't. So it's interesting. We can talk about that stuff another time.
And inshallah,
and
we'll not kill each other in this conversation, Wesley.
A goat molester asking for a friend and served you labeled tuna. See,
what?
I have no idea. So I'm not going to
get a screenshot of that. Try to make some sense. I'm curious now. Anybody else?
Wesley's been here before. He's been here a couple of times over the last couple of years.
It looks like it could be some kind of adult libation additive going on there.
Might be. Anyway, but that's probably a good place to say I got to call it quits for tonight.
All right.
So conversation's good. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the good conversation. I even appreciate Wesley. Wesley, no offense. Sometimes you're good for a laugh. Sometimes you got some great philosophy. So playing dumb will only lose you your children. Well, you might be right about that. Probably from several different fronts. Thank you for that reminder.
Hey, Scotty, I'd like to suggest that for a show, since you have a proclivity for some of the theological, historical events and writings, that you take a look at Atwell's video. I'll send you the link to it, and then after you've digested it, let's do a show on it and do a review. Because I think it'll give you a perspective that will be additive to the one that you have.
I tend to look at some of these guys who pontificate or put out information like that. Everybody declares themselves as a great thinker, and I've thought this all through, and I've researched this out, and I've got this. Same thing I say to my wife, like I said earlier. So I look at that stuff and I take it with a grain of salt because everybody in their particular philosophy or their particular presentation has the same kind of argumentation behind it. So
well,
I'm more than happy to look at his stuff. I've heard of
I would suspend that filter because the evidence, particularly in Mauro Biligio's book, I'll send you a couple of interviews where they present the data. In fact, Graham Hancock just did a show, an interview with Biglio, and I mean it's just fascinating as hell because the data, he doesn't present anything other than, hey, I did this, I went and looked at that, this is what I found, you be the judge. Mm-hmm. So it's none of that, I am an expert in this or anything else. It's empirical research that is another part of this great reveal. People have the ability now to look up information and do their own acquisition of the data, their own analysis of the data, and their own adoption of the data, which is how intelligence works.
There you go. But if you misinterpret it, you've got it wrong. So,
and that's all of us.
Let's save the conversation for when we talk about it. Otherwise, we're going to just keep dragging this out tonight. I'm done talking.
Okay.
Tonight. That's just me. If you guys want to keep that up somewhere else, go do it. I got no juice left, so I got to end the show. And I had no juice when I started. I'm even less juice now. So how can you go from no juice to less juice than no juice?
That's the same way you go into debt with a credit card. I don't know.
There it is.
You'd have to ask a pornographic actor.
My credit limit, please. That's what I did tonight at the beginning of the show. All right, guys.
Always a pleasure. See you later.
Hey, by the way, Wesley Curry, thank you. He just wants you all to know that you're not going to enjoy the Omni marks. I think I would have to agree with you there.
What are the Omni marks?
I have no idea.
No idea what that means.
He can come back next time and he'll explain that to us. Guys, good night. Professor, good to see you.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Jason, good to see you.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. All right.
Later.
That should count for the end, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do my own private one for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. You should.
Have a good night, brother.
Take care, brother.
All right, everybody, I'm out of here. Live long and prosper. We'll see you on Sunday morning. All right. And if I can find the right button to push, I would have timed that perfectly, but I didn't. There we go. Let's try that again. Live long and prosper.